Okay, today's lecture, or this afternoon's lecture, has as its topic the history of the Austrian theory of monopoly price from Menger to Rothbard. Okay, and there's a number of important reasons for surveying the theory of monopoly price as it developed in Austrian economics. The first is really that nothing has been written on monopoly price, on Austrian monopoly price theory, prior to Mises. Okay. All recent survey articles that began coming out in the 1970s usually compare Mises to Rothbard, or Mises to Rothbard and Kerzner. Okay. But did the theory of monopoly price, did it just emerge full-blown from Mises's brow? Okay. Or was there a prehistory of the theory of monopoly price? Did other Austrian economists talk about monopoly price? As we'll see, in fact, the theory of monopoly price goes back to Menger. Secondly, there's been an overemphasis on the difference between the theory of Mises and the theory of Rothbard regarding monopoly price. We know that Rothbard believes that there can be no monopoly price formed on the free market, whereas Mises allows that or concedes that in certain very, very narrow circumstances, a monopoly price could emerge on the free market. Okay, as in the case of maybe diamond mines, or where some firm has a trademark or a certain amount of goodwill. Okay, we'll talk about that. But what I want to do is to actually emphasize the similarities between their two theories and show how both theories have developed out of Menger's original theory of monopoly price. One interesting point that you might want to note is that both Rothbard and Mises noticed the similarity between their two theories. Rothbard, for example, justified the significant amount of space he devoted to the analysis of monopoly price theory and its consequences in Man, Economy, and the State, noting, quote, "The theory, though invalid on the free market, will prove very useful in analyzing the consequences of monopoly grants by government." So he thought it was just misapplied to the free market. He believed that the theory itself was essentially correct. Mises, on the other, also either completely accepted Rothbard's correction of the theory, or at least thought that Rothbard's reformulation was extremely important, depending on which source we believe. Mises' wife, Margit von Mises, recounted an incident at the 1965 Mont Pelerin Society with Joaquin Rieg, a Spanish economist, and the one who translated Human Action to Spanish. Anyway, Rieg, or Reg, I don't know how to pronounce it, asked Mises his opinion of Rothbard's disagreement with his treatment of monopoly theory in Man, Economy, and State. According to Mrs. Mises, her husband replied, quote, "Whatever Rothbard has written in this work is of the greatest importance." Okay. On the other hand, the Spanish economist Jesus Huerta de Soto reports that Rieg himself used to retell the incident in a slightly different way. He quoted Mises' reply as, "I agree with every word Professor Rothbard has written on the subject." Okay, so in either case, Mises recognized a close kinship between the two theories. Okay. Another reason for surveying the theory before Mises is that, in fact, it was the main theory of monopoly in the United States from about the late 1800s until the 1930s, when we had the imperfect competition revolution. Okay, so it was the main neoclassical theory of monopoly. And finally, certain elements in the theory allows us to better critique the current neoclassical theory, which is based on monopolistic competition and downward sloping demand curves. So let's start with Menger. Menger viewed the explanation of the formation of monopoly prices under monopoly conditions, or the formation of prices under monopoly conditions, as part of his general theory of price, as part of what I call the causal realistic theory of price. He pointed out that just as in the case of competition, the monopoly price would come to rest between the maximum buying price of the least capable buyer that purchases a unit of the monopolized good and the most capable buyer that does not purchase the unit of the good. Now let me just show you what I mean by that graphically. Let's assume you have a seller with 3 horses, okay? A single seller. He monopolizes the horses in the area, and you have 6 buyers that are interested in purchasing the horses. Let's select. Okay. Okay. So you have the monopoly seller on the left side with 3 horses. Now you have 6 buyers, each one represented by a maximum buying price, the highest price they're willing to pay for a unit of the good. The horses would obviously be sold to buyers B1 through B3, and the price would be 70. Okay, that would be the price. That is the same price that would emerge if you had 3 sellers there, each selling a horse. The price would be such that the entire stock of horses would be sold to the 3 most capable buyers. Okay. The price could not be any higher than 70, and it could be it's going to be somewhere between 65 and 70. It couldn't be any lower than 66, let's say, because if it was 65, you would have the demand exceeding the supply. You'd have a shortage. Okay. So Menger points out that the same analysis that we use to show what determines competitive price is the analysis that applies to monopoly price. Okay, doesn't matter how many units or how many sellers we have of those horses. If there are 3 horses on the market, the price is going to be exactly the same. Now he also points out that the smaller the lower the supply that the monopolist brings to market, the higher the price. So if the monopolist were to withhold 1 horse, okay, now this is something that under competitive conditions could not occur. If the monopolist withheld one horse, then the price would be somewhere between 70 and 85. It would rise from the range 65 to 70 to exclude the 3rd most capable buyer. If there's only 2 units, and let's say the monopolist destroys the 3rd horse, he has no use for it, he brings 2 units to market, and the price rises to at least above 70. Okay, and bargaining will determine whether it's near 85 or near 70. If he brings 1 horse to market, the price rises further, okay, above 85, somewhere between 100 and 85. So this is the general rule that the larger the supply, the lower the monopoly price will be. Okay, same rule that applies under competition. The only difference is that when you have 1 seller or a group of sellers acting in concert, acting together, they can determine how many units are brought to market. So Menger also mentions, by the way, that generally monopolists will set the price. So if they set the price at 85, then only 2 horses will be sold. And they allow the quantity to adjust. But that's just a matter of choice on the part of the seller. Right. One thing that cannot be done, and the Menger points this out, the monopolist is unable to set both the price and quantity. In other words, let's say he wants a high price of 100 and wants to sell all 3 horses. That's impossible. Okay? He has to either choose the price of 100, in which case he'll have 1 buyer, he'll sell 1 horse, or if he wants to sell 3 horses, he gives up his control over the price. The price is somewhere then between 65 and 70 if you want to sell 3 horses. Okay? So you can either fix price or quantity, but not both. Okay? All this is Menger's really the first one who's setting this forth. That is that he believes that this theory of monopoly has to be integrated with general price theory. Okay? Unlike the classical economists. Also, very importantly, he realized that the power to realize a monopoly price is dependent on the structure of the demand curve. And he gives in other words, he recognized, even before Marshall wrote about elasticity of demand, he doesn't use the term elasticity, but he recognized that differences in elasticity of demand will determine if a single seller can get a monopoly price. And this is the example that he gives. The prices are in terms of Austrian florins. Okay? What he tells us is the following. Assume you have a monopolist. Okay? And this monopolist has 2,000 units of a good. So you'll see in each example, A, B, and C has 2,000 units of a good. Okay? Under what conditions will he restrict supply let's say it's pounds of tomatoes. Under what conditions will he allow 1,000 pounds of tomatoes just to rot, okay, and bring only 1,000 to market? Well, let's start with C, okay? Would he do it under condition C? Well, certainly not. Why? Because if you'll note, the demand curve is very elastic, meaning when you raise the price, consumers or buyers are very responsive, and they cut back sufficiently. He raises the price by 20% from 5 florins a pound to 6 florins a pound, and that results in his sales dropping by 50%. Okay, that's a highly elastic demand curve. What happened to his total revenue? He earns actually 4,000 florins less. So under this case, even though he's the only seller of tomatoes in that district, he will still charge the competitive price. Okay. Under situation B, that the demand curve is unit elastic, meaning that the percentage by which buyers cut back on price is cut back on quantity is exactly equal to the percentage by which price rises. So total revenue doesn't change. So he would be indifferent between selling 2,000 or 1,000 tomatoes. Given that they're on hand already, he doesn't have to produce them. Okay? If he had to incur costs to produce them, if he hadn't produced them yet, then he would only produce 1,000 because he would earn higher profits. But we're assuming that the tomatoes are there. Only under condition A, where you have an inelastic demand curve, will he destroy 1,000 tomatoes, 1,000 pounds of tomatoes, and bring 1,000 pounds to market. Because under that situation, he increases price enough, he triples his price by cutting his quantity marketed in half. Notice, price goes from 2 to 6, and his total revenue increases. Okay. This is very sophisticated in 1871, that Menger came up with this analysis. All of this is in Rothbard and Mises. Okay. So for Menger, the monopolist, like the competitor, is always guided by economic calculation in choosing supply. Okay? He's guided by economic calculation. In this case, if the supply is on hand, you're not guided by profit. You've already produced the good, so your costs are sunk. You're guided by your total revenue. Okay. So Menger concluded, let me just read his conclusion, even the fact that it is in the power of the monopolist to choose either his price or the quantity sold does not imply an indeterminacy of the economic phenomena resulting from his decision. Although the monopolist has the power to set higher or lower prices or to market larger or smaller quantities of the monopolized good, there is only one particular price and only one particular quantity of the monopolized good brought to market that corresponds most exactly to his economic interest. Okay? So in this example, if the demand curve is as it is under scenario A, he will charge 6 florins and bring 1,000 pounds to market. If the demand curve, which is controlled by consumers, is the same as in the scenario C, he would bring 2,000 pounds to market and charge 5 florins. That maximizes his revenue in this case, and therefore his marginal utility. Okay. He goes on to say that each given economic situation sets definite limits within which price formation and the distribution of goods must take place. Any other price and distribution of goods that is outside these limits is economically impossible. Okay? The phenomena of monopoly trade present us, therefore, with a picture of strict conformity in every respect to definite laws. So even looking at this seller here, we can figure out if the horses are available. If he sells 3, let's say you get the highest price possible for each group. If he sells 3, that would be 210. If he sells 2, that would be 170 in total revenue. If he sells 1, he'd get 100. So it would be in his economic interest to bring and sell 3 horses to market. Okay, that's an inelastic demand curve. That's a very elastic demand curve for horses. Therefore, he wouldn't withhold or destroy any of the horses. Okay. So what he's trying to do is to show that the monopolist, just like the competitor, is subject to definite economic laws, and they're the same laws that govern price formation under competition.